Well, welcome to the Akin Huddle, where four brothers and our dad talk Christian leadership, family, and sports. And today we're going to talk about a non-controversial issue like raising kids in a travel sports world. And so it could be an interesting conversation. But before we jump in, we're going to get to know the final Akin on this podcast. We're going to get to know Tim. Tim, tell us just a little bit about how you came to know the Lord and how you got into ministry.
Yeah, so it means similar story to you guys. Became a believer right around the age of 6. I think I was turning almost 7. One Sunday night, came to Dad and just told Dad, "Hey, I want to become a Christian." So him and Mom set me down on our living room couch and asked me if I understood that I was a sinner and needed forgiveness. I said absolutely. And then they just reminded me of the gospel and asked me if I believed that Jesus lived a perfect life, died on the cross for our sins, and rose from the dead. I said I believe that absolutely. And then they led me in a version of what we call the sinner's prayer, which I thought was just a helpful way to help me articulate what God was doing in my heart. It wasn't like abracadabra. It's not like a magic bullet or anything like that, but it was a way for me to articulate as a young kid what God was doing in my heart. And obviously, probably like you guys and many people listening that get saved when you're young, I obviously have grown, matured, and learned so much. Never really had kind of that walk away from the Lord experience, but really do believe that at that age is when I put my faith in the gospel and received the Lord. And then again, some of you guys obviously love sports growing up and thought I would try to maybe make a go at small college basketball or something and be a coach. And then got an opportunity as a senior in high school through our school that we all went to, the Christian Academy of Louisville, to go on my first ever international mission trip. We went to Honduras. And for whatever reason, they asked me to kind of preach, if that's what you want to call it. I'm glad there's no video of it to this day. Not that I've gotten much better, but I'm sure I'm better than I was then. And preached a little bit. One particular day, a little boy, 8-year-old kid named Omar, wanted to receive Christ. So me and the translator went outside, and I got to walk him through how to become a Christian, and he got saved. And God just kind of ignited something in my heart in that moment. Shortly after we went to lunch, while we were at lunch, one of the leaders from the trip was sitting across from me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about going into ministry?" And I just quickly popped off and said, "No, that's what Dad does." And then a peer right next to me, a guy that we've grown up with, Jess Rayner. We've grown up with the Rayner boys, and they've been part of our family. Jess said, we was a peer of mine who, of course, knows my strengths and weaknesses, and says, "Hey, no, Tim, I've been watching you on the trip. I actually think you need to really begin to pray about that. We think God's maybe doing that in you." And so for me, I feel like I kind of got the external call first, somebody saying, "Hey, you need to really pray through this, think through this." And then as I began to do that, God did ignite a fire within me. And I always tell people, like, the number one way I knew that God had changed my desires was I was a horrible student, didn't like academics, had no desire to learn. But then when God called me into ministry, God put it on my heart to say, "Hey, if you're going to do this, you've got to go all in. You've got to commit yourself to this," and really grew into my desire to study and learn and grow. And that's how God called me into ministry.
I wonder how it is that you and Paul were y'all the only two of the four of us that were ever ineligible for sports in school?
Yeah, and I think I was ineligible twice. So, beat that. Yeah.
I was ineligible my freshman year. That did happen. Yes.
Yeah, got your mom a speeding ticket in the process.
This
Yeah.
is
Correct.
I think when
And
y'all
now-
made fun of me when y'all made fun of me earlier for not having a PhD in an earlier episode, let's just say apparently anybody can get a PhD, even people that are ineligible in high school.
Paul is the chief academic officer at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
It's the Lord's grace, all right? The Lord's
Amen.
grace.
Exactly right. And it's not about how you start; it's how you finish, right, guys?
That's right.
Tim, briefly tell us each kind of ministry stop, and then we'll talk about those places where you lived.
Yeah, very quickly. So started off as a part-time youth pastor at a small church in Roxborough, North Carolina, about an hour from Wake Forest, where we were going. Anna and I had gotten married at this point, and Anna and I were finishing up our college there at Southeastern, now Judson College. So I was there for a year. It was during that time God called us into international missions. Did not expect that. Weren't looking for that, but God led us to Central Asia, where I got to use coaching football as a platform for that. It was an incredible opportunity. That's probably where God did the greatest work in our marriage and our life, and just opened us up to the things of the nations. Came back from that because needed to finish up seminary. Had our first son while we were over there. Got pregnant with our second son. We came back to Louisville, Kentucky, where I got to go on staff at our home church, Highview Baptist Church. I got to be a part-time youth pastor. Also got to be a full-time Bible teacher there, did that for about 3 years, had another son while we were there. Then we moved to West Palm Beach, Florida, and got to go serve as a campus pastor with our youth pastor that we had as a kid growing up, Jimmy Scroggins. Got to do that for about 5 years, had 2 more kids there. And then through that experience, felt like God was calling me to be a senior pastor. So moved here at the end of 2017, have now been here for over 8 years, had our 6th child once we got here. So we'll be married 20 years this coming July. We've got 6 kids, 17 down to 6. And that's kind of been our ministry.
It's amazing to be married 20 years when you look like you're 23. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah, very true. I have to remind people all the time. I'll walk into places, funerals especially. This happens a lot. Honestly, I'll walk in and I'll say, I'm here to do the funeral, and they'll look at me. And I'll go, well, I'm the pastor of First Baptist. And they'll say this, the real pastor? Yeah, I mean, I'm the real pastor. Not like I do get that frequently.
I'm surprised too. Yeah. Tim, favorite things about each place you've lived?
Yeah, man. So Texas, I think we've said something. Cowboys, North Carolina, basketball. I like to try to do one word. Louisville. Growing up, that's where we mature. Those are kind of the key.
2 words.
I'll give a phrase per each one. Thanks a lot there, Smart Tail. Very good. And so growing up, Kentucky was kind of that growing up phase. And then I'm trying to think the next. Central Asia. So, man, incredible. If you guys knew the country, I probably shouldn't say it on here. Incredible food, world-class city, coolest, man, one of the coolest places in the world, beautiful places in the world to live. And then South Florida, man, the sunshine and kind of like paradise. And then Georgia, I mean, the dogs. And so we've grown up in terms of our marriage and our family. How'd that go against Cincinnati? But we at least y'all made it
better than Georgia did against the backup coach for Ole Miss.
And then of course here, Georgia. This is where we've kind of grown up in terms of our marriage and our kids and all of that. So it's been a real sweet season of life here. So that would be the kind of the different stops.
And you mainly played football and basketball growing up?
That's right. So yeah.
Which did you like between the two?
Whatever season I was in, honestly, it's kind of hard to pick. I think I was probably in many ways a better basketball player, but I was a much more consistent football player. We've talked about. I rarely had, I'm not saying I had amazing games, but I really had bad football games. I just had some abysmal basketball games, and so I just can't quite figure out, what happened there. Why
We couldn't either.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, pal. And so I got a few excuses for a couple of them, but there's no excuses. So, whatever season I was in, I think football, it's hard to beat the camaraderie that comes with a big team like that. There's so many guys on a football team, and there's just something unique about that experience that I think I always miss and enjoyed.
And you even got to coach that on the mission field and use that together with, again, we can't talk about the place, but it was fascinating to see them trying to play American football. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Is football then your favorite to watch between the two, or is it similar, whatever season you're in?
Yeah, no, I'm not into that like red zone thing or whatever that NFL. So I like college football. That would by far be my favorite. I think I'd rather watch Buffalo versus New Mexico than watch the red zone. So
a red zone college is incredible. Incredible.
I
agree.
Yeah, I like college football of all. I was an NBA fan kind of back in 2013 through 2017, and then NBA is just not fun to watch anymore. So I'll tune in for the playoffs or whatever. But college football by far would be my favorite.
We've asked you this on another podcast, but I think it's worth talking about again. Favorite athlete or athlete you've met?
Yeah, so last time we talked about it, I gave the Sam Perkins, the Big Smooth story. One I had forgotten about was we all, I think, were together with a friend of ours in the summer. We went to Duke, and we got to go into Cameron Indoor. And while we were there, we got to see J.J. Redick. And I think I talked to him. He was like in the back hallway, kind of near their weight room or something. And so I actually got to meet, for that one little moment, J.J. Redick, which was kind of neat. And
did he flop when we were meeting him?
No, I don't think. No, no, he's a pretty impressive looking guy, actually, surprisingly.
I'm saying, I just mean, he probably acted like he got fouled or something.
No, no, I don't think so. And he wasn't going off on Doc Rivers either, like he likes to do. He wasn't doing that either. But he was there. And then when I was a kid, I met Sam Perkins. I got to go down and tug his jersey, and that was, man, to me, I thought that was incredible.
And then you stole the ball from Rajon Rondo and scored
Yes,
on him.
yeah. I like the way you tell the story better than I do, but I did.
My recollection of the story is I had to drive back from Murray to watch the game and then go back, so I didn't get to stay long. And my recollection is that they ISO'd you 3 times in a row on him, and you scored all 3 times.
There's some version of that that's true. I like that story. That sounds really good to me. I'll go with that one. And I think I did score 6 or 8 in a row on him, or something. It's something like that. I had a moment. And again, that was one of my better games.
If we're doing this podcast 3 to 4 years from now, it'll be 10 points the next time I tell the story.
And he looked over at the bench and said, "He can't guard me."
Yeah. And then he's not an athlete, but I did get to meet the rapper Petey Pablo one time outside of a Chili's in Raleigh, North Carolina. That was pretty. That was back when the song North Carolina was a big deal. So it was kind of a neat thing.
That's amazing. Most people won't even know who you're talking about now.
No, most of you have no idea who that guy is.
All right, we're going to jump into the conversation about kids raising kids in a travel sports world. I want to start though, and maybe just one of y'all answer this question. Like, to even think this is an important question to ask in a ministry family situation, we have to answer the question: then why are sports a big deal? Why are sports a good thing? Any of you guys want to tackle that first? Then we'll go to Dad and kind of hear about how he handled it with us growing up, and then how you guys handle it as well now. But why are sports an important thing?
I think they're incredibly important in terms of teaching life lessons, spiritual lessons, things like perseverance, which is a hallmark of the Christian faith, teamwork, unity, playing your part, submitting to authority, chain of command, common goal, common mission. Even as Tim just mentioned about football, one of the things that's cool is, and we've mentioned the story before, is like Tim and I were on the front end of creating the football program at Christian Academy of Louisville, where Paul's son is now, and now their football team's won 4 state championships. But like, you're part of a multi-generational, like where I'm at Carson Newman, people who played football for Ken Sparks over a number of years, even if they didn't play together, talk about being part of the Carson Newman family. And so there's a multi-generational family aspect to it that's similar to the church. Teaches courage in a safety-obsessed world that's risk-averse. It helps teach kids to mature, teaches grit, overcoming adversity, learning to deal with stress, how to prepare and plan. Like, all these things are really great lessons. And then ultimately, one of the things I love right now, and there's been a huge movement on college campuses among teams where people are coming to faith in Christ and Bible studies. FCA has had that branded shirt for the last couple of years, Jesus Won. Yeah. And this idea of like, life is a battle between good and evil, and good has triumphed over evil. And Jesus is the victor. And then the last thing I'll say is like the origin of sports, like organized sports in a lot of ways, the YMCA was specifically founded for reaching people who liked to play but weren't coming to a church, and to disciple young men to become mature Christians. And so it has had a faith heritage to it that's really important.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think even the shaping nature of sports. I mean, you go through hardship, you go through difficulty. There's good, there's bad, there's ugly, but there's growth. All of those things. And so I think we could probably go on and list some of the benefits, the many benefits that are there with sports. And all of us obviously enjoyed those growing up, and now are seeing our kids enjoy that. I think to kind of get to maybe what you were talking about, Nate, in terms of the kind of the question, I think it's important for us to even just kind of note that there is kind of this whole travel sports industry that seems to be on the rise today. And so I just pulled up some stats to kind of give a little bit of a framework for the conversation. And it seems like today there's actually fewer kids that are playing recreational sports, but those that are playing recreational sports are playing it at a much more intense level than previous generations. And I know, like, for us growing up, it was not uncommon for people to be multi-sport athletes, to have that opportunity. Now it seems like people are specializing at much earlier ages. And so just to give some quick numbers here, the youth sports economy annually, parents spend $40+ billion annually. The note says the industry was once $15 billion. Now it's up to 40 billion plus annually. The average cost per child in 2019 was about $700 per child. In 2024, that was increased to $1,500. So almost a more than doubling, 50% increase in just 5 years. And so you have travel tournaments, you have private coaching, you have camps, you have training, you have team fees and club fees and everything that goes along with it. And so we definitely have this industry that seems to be on the rise. And I would say in our culture, it's not. I don't think I'm out of line to say that it has become, in some sense, maybe an idol in American culture and context. You know, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so we see this kind of reality that's going on, and so I think there's a lot of families that are just trying to figure out, okay, if I love the Lord and I love the local church and I want to be a faithful Christian family, but I also love sports and I see the value of sports. How do I put these things together? How do I need to be thinking about these as a parent?
And the truth is, we can talk about other things that would be extracurricular activities that are good for people that teach some of the things that John you mentioned ahead of time. But we uniquely know sports, and that's probably even the most dominant given some of the stats, Paul, you just shared. Dad, we love sports, and we still love sports, and we played them all the time. How did you I want to think through how you thought through this topic in a kind of a broad sense, and then kind of guidelines, guardrails to this as we were growing up. It was even different then, so we can talk about how it's changed over time. But just give us kind of how you approached it as we were growing up.
Well, I approached parenting with the idea of giving you all a big playing field with very clear guidelines and parameters. And I always told you all that if you were faithful and responsible, the playing field would get bigger. If you weren't, then I would determine the size of it based upon y'all's behavior. And so sports was a natural component of that. The parameters were basically this, and it was easier for us then. We were not going to let anything take the place of what is the normal rhythm of serving the Lord and worshiping the Lord. So you guys were all really good at soccer, but for some reason, when we lived here in the early 90s, they had a lot of soccer games that started at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. And I just informed the coaches in advance, look, my guys will be there if the games are 1 o'clock or later. They won't be there if they're 1 o'clock and earlier. And they would push back, well, they're our better players. And I would say, it doesn't matter. That particular time is reserved for the Lord. And what I want to say to parents today is be careful. Paul mentioned the idea of an idol. What you do if you're not careful is you basically tell your children, we will work Jesus in to our lives when it's convenient. But when it's not convenient, he kind of gets kicked to the curb. And I want to say to those parents, you're setting yourself up for disappointment when they get older, especially if they, again, if Jesus is convenient, we work him in. If he's not going to be a part of our life. And for us, even though we love sports and y'all are all involved in lots of sports, the centrality and the priority of Christ in our lives and the church in our lives was there, and we didn't negotiate that.
Two things I want to say to that. One, I might want to get that we were good at soccer edited out later on. I'm not sure I want people knowing that.
But we were the best players on the team.
We were the best players on the team for the short time we played. Yeah, absolutely. And the second thing is, and a guy said this to me years ago, and I've never forgotten it. He says, what happens when we sort of allow kids to skip Sunday morning is that it's not we're explicitly teaching our kids that Sunday mornings are not important, that being with the church is not important. It's that we're implicitly teaching them certain things by the rhythms of our lives, and that's something that we need to be cautious about and think about. John, maybe you jump in, or others think about kind of how you have thought through this as a parent, and then again, are there guardrails that you keep in mind that could be helpful for others to hear?
Yeah, we may not all be on the same page exactly on this. I think we're just on the same page in terms of priorities, but how does it flesh out? I do think one of the reasons why we want our children involved in sports is, and I think it's good for children to be involved in sports, all the things we mentioned, but also we live in such a screen-dominated culture, and the more they're practicing and playing sports, the less they're going to be digitally engaged. And so they're going to be doing things that are active and healthy. And so we prioritize that and are like, hey, yeah, be in practices, go to camps when you can, like all these different things. It's really helpful. Now, in terms of the travel sports, we do have on occasion where our kids will play on Sunday mornings. Um, it's maybe 5 Sundays out of the year or something like that. And we just try to make sure they know, like, hey, this is a specific season where on this kind of one-off time we're going to do this. But obviously the rhythm of our life, the other 47 weekends out of the year, is that we're in church and we prioritize that. And so I hope that by having those conversations and recognizing that the time frame to play sports is relatively short in the grand scheme of life, that by clear communication, that we're not implicitly communicating something wrong, like you said, but that is a danger that we want to navigate. But again, it's a short window. And I also think too, I'm fine with the travel sports, but I'm with Paul in terms of, like, it's not an idol for us because we have no illusion that our kids are going to be playing professionally. So we want them to learn the lessons of sports. We want them to be able to play during that time frame that they can, but it's not like we're thinking, oh, we've got to put all this money into sports because in order for them to get a scholarship to play D1 or whatever. It's like, no, we want them to have a good time playing sports in the season that they can, and to gain the lessons and the friendships and the different experiences they can have from it. But we recognize that there is a ceiling on that.
Yeah, so I say when it comes to guardrails, I think John hit something real well. I think Paul alluded to earlier, and even Dad. I mean, I think the first thing is, and do it for the right reasons. So John laid out perfectly at the very beginning why sports are so impactful. So even if you have a kid that may end up not even being an athlete, even when they're young, I think any child trying at least a sport to see if they like it is helpful, because as John and Paul, it teaches just so many things you just can't learn in life. So I think, one, just doing it for the right reasons, not so that dad can, have some fulfilled thing that didn't happen in his life, not so they can go pro, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Second, don't neglect the church. I thought John hit it well. So John says, hey, maybe 4 or 5 times a year we may miss a Sunday morning. Okay, I think it's fine as long as you're not missing major chunks of the year, to where your kids feel like, oh, this is a priority over church. So not neglecting church. I think 3, making sure you're not neglecting family time. I think this is a big challenge because if your kids do travel sports, plus if they do individual training, which Paul mentioned is an added component. Sometimes they go hand in hand together. And just real quick, the challenge really is this, because I think there's a truth to this. You may not want your kid to go play pro, but you may want your kid to aspire to be as best as they can. Sports has gotten so competitive now, as Paul hit, many of these kids are now specialized. So if your kid is generalized and they play multiple sports, when they're moving on to their second or third sport, the other kid is still in their first sport the whole year. So when your kid comes back to that first sport, they are a little bit behind the 8 ball. Let's just use basketball in terms of their footwork and their ball handling, their ability to shoot, because they've been in football, they've been in baseball, they've been in whatever. And that is a tension that parents feel. But I think we just got to encourage parents, hey, that's a real thing. So do the very best you can for your family's sake. How do I mesh them being as good as they can be, but still prioritizing family time? There's some practical ways you can do that. I know John coaches, right? So that puts John around his boy when he's there, or has done that for significant seasons. I know the family would travel when Maddie would cheer. So the family's there for those. So there's some ways to try to mesh those two things together. 4th, don't go broke. So, like, if it's going to break the bank, we've made a decision, our daughter Charlotte's a pretty good soccer player, to put her on a travel team. I think it's something like $1,500 to $2,000. We just don't feel like we have that margin right now. So she's in a rec league, and is it hurting her athletically? What'd you say, Nate?
And she dominates.
She does well. It probably hurts her. It probably hurts her in the long term. But we just made that call, and we just said, hey, look, we're not going to judge other families that do something different. That's fine. That's just what they've got to choose to do. And then the last thing I'd say, parameter, be careful. Don't burn your kid out. It can happen. I'd say baseball is probably the worst at this. I don't have kids that play baseball, so I may be speaking out of turn, but they'll play 6 or 7 games in a weekend, maybe 8. and it's hot, it's brutal, and they'll play 100+ games in a year. And a lot of these kids begin, and Dad knows this from playing baseball, they begin to break down physically. It becomes too much, and then they just don't even want anything to do with the sport anymore. And so just be careful as a parent to not burn them out. And so those are some different parameters that we've tried to use and guidelines to try to just help our family as we walk through this.
I wonder even today with major league pitchers breaking down like they do, far greater in numbers than when I was younger. I just have to wonder. You had this child starting to throw a ball when they were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and on, and the body is just not geared unless you're extraordinary in terms of the physical attributes that God's given you. Your body can't take that. It's just like playing football. If you start at 6 or 7 and you get beat on year after year, by the time you are in the upper years of high school, your body's taken a beating already. And to carry it on into the college and the pro, I just think you're running some real risks there. And wisdom ought to be, balancing just how much we put on our kids at those tender ages. John?
I think from what I hear, and baseball's not my sport, but I hear a lot of parents are trying to get their kids to get Tommy John surgery as early as possible because it makes you better at throwing the ball or whatever after you get it. And so it's just like that's an idol.
Yep.
If you're like, I'm trying to get to that point. So to when you mention that, it's like, yeah, it's not only that you recognize there's only so many throws, they're trying to rush towards it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul, jump in.
Yeah. Just, I know we'll be moving towards a close here in a little bit, but just a couple of things in light of what Tim and John kind of mentioned there. We've kind of approached a lot of our travel sports approach in the same way that they have. And I think for me, the end game is always, and I talk to parents about this fairly often, and I'll say, what is your goal? What is your goal for your child? And what I think is unfortunate is right now you have, because of just that tendency towards idolatry, you have a lot of parents who are like, I want my child to have a college scholarship. That's what I want. And sometimes that could be financial, and I can understand that. Other times it's just more of a pride, prestige kind of thing. And so the stats though don't lie. The data is there. There's about 8 million students in the United States playing high school sports. About 6 or 7% of those go on to play collegiate sports. That's out of high school. And then as you move down the level, about 1 to 3% of those high school athletes play Division I sports. Far less than 1% of those ever go on to play professional sports. And so if you're not careful, like you guys have said, you can kind of build into your kids this idea of sports is ultimate, sports is everything, sports is ultimate, sports is everything. When they get to be 18, 20, 22, 24, and sports is kind of run out, well, then what? And so I often want to tell parents, let's make sure that we're not setting up our kids for the age 18. Let's think about who our kids are going to be at the age 30, 35, 40. Who are we shaping and forming them to be? And so for us, that goal has always been kind of along with what Tim is talking about. Our goal has always been, I want my kid, if possible, to make a high school team and potentially to contribute on that high school team. And we recognize that if they want to play multiple sports, that because of the specialization, that could increasingly be a challenge. We're at a Christian school, so it's not like we're at a massive, large public school, but our sports have become pretty good in recent years. And so it's been an increasing challenge to make sure that our kids can even make high school sports. But that's always been the goal for us, is because of the lessons that you learn and the benefits that you get through sports. If you can make a high school team and contribute on a high school team, we think that's a great thing. We've run into some of what Dad talked about with soccer in recent years. Louisville's a largely Catholic city. And so our daughters that played travel soccer are on teams with a lot of these Catholic schoolgirls, and they don't really care. They will plan a soccer game at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. They have no problem with that. And so we've had to call and tell the coaches, hey, we love you. We love the team, but we're not going to be able to make it to the games until 11:30 or 12. It's just the reality for us. And like John, occasionally we've said if it's an out-of-town tournament, it's once or twice every 4 to 5 months, then we're willing to kind of sacrifice 1 or 2 of those Sundays. But for the most part, for us, we've tried to draw the line and explain to our kids, this is ultimate, this is temporary. And so this is how we're trying to process through it as a family.
That's good. I played 3 sports when I was growing up, but I look at it now, if I were y'all's age or even today, there's no way. At most, I might have played 2. and baseball was by far my better sport. And I don't really have a football body, so I could even see it where my coaches would have put pressure on me just to limit myself to one sport. And that pressure today is
Yeah.
massive. I don't know any three. I even ran track. I don't know any 3 or 4 sport athletes in this day and age. And again, I wouldn't be one if I were that age today either.
Do a 12-second 100. What was your?
Hey, set the school record for like a
I think I
5-minute
broke
mile.
13.
Okay.
Yeah, no speed
Well,
demon here. No
12
speed
I saw
demon. Tim had the
we've
most
seen
speed of all of us.
we've seen your jump shot, so I think football and baseball would have been your
Well, that's
sport.
not fair because I was older when I had my jump shot. You just see when I was 17 and 18. That is not fair.
That's true. That's true.
Two things I want to say just real quick to add on to especially what Paul was saying. One, this idea that you have to do travel sports or you're not going to get a college scholarship is a little bit false. So there's a kid right now playing baseball at Carson Newman, great baseball player. His dad's a church planter in Middle Tennessee, and he was being recruited kind of small Division I, but then full ride Division II. And his dad basically didn't let him play travel ball until like his last 2 years of high school. And it didn't keep him from getting a scholarship. The second thing I would say is this, and I don't remember the exact number, but we had the opportunity this last summer. Judson's a basketball player, got to go to the University of Tennessee basketball practice and spend about 30 minutes with Coach Barnes at the end of practice. First thing he asked Judson when he met him is, "What are you reading in your Bible?" And then the second thing he basically is like, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And Judd's like, I love playing basketball. And he told us this stat, which is crazy. It's something like less than 5,000 athletes who've ever dressed out for an NBA game of all the millions of people who've ever played basketball. And and Rick Barnes goes, how many people who set their minds to being a doctor or a lawyer or a business person get to actually do that and be part of that field? A lot of them. Yeah. Whereas in basketball, there's God-given things and whatever that, just, it doesn't happen for the vast majority of people. And so it was a good conversation from a wise man who has succeeded in that field.
Highest level. Yeah.
Highest level, except we got to get to a Final Four. But I love
him. Did you tell him that when you met? Did you tell him that when you met him?
No, I'm scared of him. I think he's the greatest thing ever. I think he's the greatest thing ever. But it was a reminder about priorities, and to come from him, it said a lot.
Hey, one thing, Nate, I want to come to you, and then you need to wrap us up. Probably you're the only one on the call that played college sports, and obviously played at a high level. Played mid-major college basketball. Got to go to the NCAA tournament twice, and obviously very accomplished individual. I'd just be interested to get your take. You actually played it. And so it'd be interesting to get your take on what the joys were, and then maybe the negatives of playing collegiately at that level.
So, I would echo all the things that have been said. I think sports does a tremendous job of helping young people grow up and mature. And one of the things we're talking about is like, what's the point of raising your kids? And the point of raising your kids is so that they will be mature. They'll be those who can be normal functioning people in society that can flourish in society, and obviously that they can flourish for the Lord. And so I think sports has a tremendous ability to shape towards that. I also think that the idolatry of sports has a tremendous ability to really destroy people. And so it's like with any good thing, with any good, powerful thing, there needs to be a lot of wisdom and discernment with how you approach it. And so I would just say, there are things that can quickly turn out for good and things that can quickly turn out for bad. And the way by which you think through sports and the way by which you bring along your family and your church family to help you think through those issues, particularly those powerful type issues, I think that's going to be the better for you. And so I think this is a really complicated topic because there's a bunch of different ways that you can be faithful and approach this topic. But I do think there's enough warnings that it's that serious that you should really give serious consideration. And one other thing I would just say is that y'all have sort of highlighted this a little, but I do think there's something very interesting. I have young kids, so I was a year ago I had to do a thing on living in a digital age at a conference, and they did a Q&A with me afterwards, and like every question was like, how do you let your teenager handle phones? And I'm like, I've got a 4-year-old. I can tell you right now what I intend to do when she's 16. But when she's crying, and because I won't give her a phone at 12, like I want to think I'm going to be strong, but I can't tell you that for sure. And so like I don't know what I'm going to say to all these things, years down the road. And so I don't want to pretend that they're not complicated at all. I do, though, think there is something very powerful about parents being able to say to the culture things like, hey, we're not going to do this
Yep.
because we have a higher priority. And so in that sense, I think we've all kind of said these issues, really, it's a hard issue. And really, there's some priority issues, and you can't know what those are for every person based upon their actions. And so I think it's a good thing for us to probably pick up again another time. There'll be more questions to answer here, but I think, really helpful stuff. We really appreciate you guys listening. Hope to see you guys next time.